Welcome to Potentials, everyone. This is Líja, and today my special guests are Frank Chille. Once again, thank you for coming back. I appreciate it. And Dr. Andrea Martin as well. So thank you both for returning. And we're going to be talking about Albert Coe and his experience. And Frank will be sharing that with some pictures, and Andrea has a copy of the book as well, and we also have a copy of an older version of the book to show everyone, and we're going to provide that PDF in the description, the link to the PDF. So let's get started. What do you have to tell us about this, Frank?
Well, I thought we were going to start with the message from Andrea.
Oh, right. Okay. Andrea, I forgot about that. You had a message. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. You had a message today, and you're going to share that with everyone.
Well, our viewers are still awake now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not. I'm maybe. Oh my God. All right. So anyway, yeah. So I mean, for me, that what's nice about this book. So the new book, I'll just show you that. For those people, it's going to be backwards. We should have taken a picture and put it on, but that's okay. If you don't want,
no, it's not backward on mine.
Doesn't come out. That comes out.
No,
you can see it. Oh, awesome.
Yeah, you can see it. Yep.
So this is the book. It's called Starfall. This is a new copy, and there it is. But yeah,
awesome.
if likes to have, like, you want to sit outside or whatever, and it's got all the old photographs in there too from the original book.
Cool.
Yeah. So this is available, and also has an interesting few chapters in the beginning about different kinds of early contact experiences. There's a foreword by Sean Castile, Timothy Green Beckley, and they talk about the different kinds of UFO and contactee experiences that came after Albert Coe. Some of the more famous ones, the old timer type ones. So yeah, if anybody's interested in that, there's it's not a bad book. It's what I really like about that book is it's a story of friendship. And we think of Stefano Brescia and his text, Amicizia. I mean, I think that would really apply to Albert Coe and his experience with his best friend, Zred, who comes from Tau Ceti. But he comes from Venus, but he is a Tau Ceti person. But so yeah, I mean, to me, it's just about, this story is about finding friendship and understanding the richness of that, and how it develops over time, and how we reclaim ourselves through these deep connections with others. And
beautiful, yeah.
I've been, and Linda and I, there's just been, and I swear, yeah, there's some weird, I don't really follow a lot of different things. I try to stay in my own lane. But just kind of in the ether, there's a lot of things that have been going on with energies. And people have just been I myself, I know, Linda, you had, I went like, I went
went down the rabbit hole.
Oh, I mean, this is bad news, yeah, I went down pretty good. So weird stuff, yeah, for sure. So I don't know how many people are experiencing different weird energy type things,
Yes.
So yeah. And it's really about, and they're saying, it's about release and reclaiming the self. So I've been, since my deep dive, I work with, I worked with Rebecca Rose, and she instantly, gave me direction and clarity and what it was all about. And then I was able to sort of, connect on a deeper level with Ika, who is our Pleiadian, friend. He works with us too. He just can't be here in person with us right now, but he likes to share his thoughts with us, and he goes through the same things. I think that's important. People understand. It's one of the things he wants when he comes forward with, when we have our chats, right? And he wants to come forward with information. It's as a friend, as a brother, right? Something like that. And he doesn't want anyone to see him as some kind of, like, I mean, he's got age on him, so it's like there's a wisdom experience because they have different lifespans than we do.
Right.
But it's yeah. I mean, he doesn't want people to see some kind of, like, important. But it's worth. We all have something important to share, and that's what the key point is. And so we've kind of been talking about, again, is that reclaiming the self, finding your true nature, and not giving that away. And with that comes a lot of release, that people can have. I know myself, right? I think many of us possibly have had issues with change and having a hard time dealing with change, and the fear of the unknown, but the fear of letting go, even though what can be coming is going to be better than what you have now, but nevertheless, understanding that everything changes. The only thing constant is this idea of change, and holding on to things is only impeding you. And so I guess here's some quick ideas what we did in our kind of our long conversation, which has been over a couple of days, so we won't be going through a lot, but just some of the highlights that that he brought out, and we chatted about, and Linda, you brought forward as well, and we kind of went in a three-way circle on that, because he can see things from a little different perspective, you know, because he's coming in from it's always important, you know, when you are dealing with something, to have somebody from the outside come in that you trust to kind of give you a different perspective.
Yes.
So, you know, yeah, you know, that is, yeah. So he says people don't realize how beautiful they are. This is one of his main things. Is this lack of understanding just how amazing you are as a being, how amazing all beings are, whether you're an oak tree or a squirrel or a chicken or a cow or whatever, you know. Animals understand that, you know, and you don't see, you know, maple trees and oak trees and apple trees. No, they're in their own way. They grow. Their beauty is in their knowing of who they are, the way they grow, the way they twist, the way they, you know, put their leaves on and apples and whatever. So he says, you know, when you radiate, when you locate your power, that was his big thing. And he shows me, because I can go through his perspective, and it's like, oh yeah, you know, I never saw that. But he's like, you know, when people, I think, you know, this goes on to later on, we're going to bring a few concepts of how we tend to make ourselves small and insignificant, and nobody sees us. You know, everybody kind of disappears into the shadows, and that's just unfortunate, because you're then not allowing your gifts to shine, not allowing your true self to shine, and therefore you are a dim light, right? You know, but you don't have to be that way, right? So that is the one thing that he showed me coming through him, is like, people radiate when they locate their power. And this has to do with that idea of changing perspective. He says so many people have this narrow way of experiencing the self and life. You know, they only have that sort of one railroad track way of looking at things. You're in this, like the railroad tunnel, you know. He's like, but you don't understand what's around you, what's in you, and how those things all come together. So he says, if you view yourself through the eyes of others, you would see the real you. When we make ourselves small, it is distressing for others. And I think that's true. I think we've all been around, or we know our friends and family and ourselves, when we're going through sort of a dark period or a shadow work period, it's distressing for others around to see that, you know, especially when there's no need for it, and it's only because you're being self-defeatist, or you're beating yourself up. Your ego mind is beating you up. So he said, you know, if you just take some time to imagine what you'd look like through the eyes of others, you would see the real you, and it isn't anything like what you would expect. You know, you're quite beautiful. So when we make ourselves small, as he says, it's distressing. You are denying others your real potential. Now, and we did that. That was a joke. A bit. We had a dad joke. You know, a bit of a dad. But he says, yeah. In faults, but faults are part of this journey. So no one is perfect, and of course he doesn't see himself as perfect, right? You know, no one is perfect, right? They're not perfect. Right. We're not perfect. No one's perfect. That's the but you're perfect in that, and that's the whole point. That's where the interest lies, in the journey, in the experiences, in the ups and downs. See, that's where the interest lies, you know. So what happened here? So here he took a little bit of a backward journey into a more of a historical, socio-political historical perspective. And he says what's happened on Earth is the depressing of everyone's gifts, right? And the idea of expressing your gifts and your true nature and your authenticity has been what I call like a soul murder. You know, you're taught to be in the ego. You're taught to be what everyone wants you to be, or what you think you should be versus what you actually are. And that's how this whole, you know, decades long, probably centuries, who knows, of the depressing of the gifts of humanity. And everyone's carrying around this sort of hurt child. Because children, I can't, because we don't want to speak for everything. He's talking in sort of a collective, that children here on Earth are not nurtured. You know, they're sort of, they come in as this really open-minded, being, and instead of having their natural self, their authenticity, who they are, finding who they are, allowing them to find who they are, they're locked into sort of a control system, and the self is then, you know, chained up. It's not considered, you know, as valuable, right? Not because it can't speak for everyone, but this is the collective. So the message, right, is again to see your true self, or see your true soul, and what's the real person. So not only in yourself that you see your trueness, but you see that in other people who don't see it in themselves yet. So that's what he's been doing with a lot of humans that he meets. He sees their again potential, but he sees who they really are. He sees how beautiful they are, what they could radiate if they just opened up, released, and allowed that to happen.
Right.
And something that we all need to do as we go through life. And you're going to meet people who are struggling deeply with some of these situations, and it can be very difficult for some people. But to allow them that space and to always be there to sort of enable that release, so that they can sort of unfurl like a beautiful chrysanthemum, you know. So that was pretty much what we were talking about. So
Yes, that was
Very good.
tie it
Very
all
good.
up in a nutshell. That was beautiful. Yes. And that was like a 2 hour long conversation that we had. So that's
oh,
pretty
we've been
good.
talking for days. I mean,
Well, you and I, we had this earlier, this
yeah,
conversation.
yeah.
And
Well,
it was pretty,
we were going. Well, we were really talking
and
about
Ika
this morning.
was in on it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, he was very interested this morning, and I just wanted to bring you in, Linda, to see if you had any questions for him. And again,
Right.
Frank too. I know you're busy so much, but if you have any questions too that you'd want to ask him, he'd always be, you know.
Excellent. Excellent. That's a fine synopsis of all that download that you had
Well,
received.
oh, it was a big one. Yeah,
It was a big one.
it was a big one. Yeah.
Yes. And I feel like a lot of people are having the same message beamed at them right now. I'm just noticing that a lot of us are having the same feeling and the same kind of epiphany, I guess you would say, where we're all realizing that we're coming into our gifts, we're coming into our powers, and that we're recognizing that what that is and what that means and what we can do, what creativity we have within ourselves that we can bring to the table, each one of us collectively, and keep bringing to the table, and different things. Doesn't have to be the same dish every time. We have
No.
multiple dishes that we can make and bring to the table. So
It's a
yes,
tremendous awakening. Tremendous awakening.
But I
yes,
mean, and to me, I think that's the main takeaway I had from reading this book. In this book, it's called Starfall, but it's the relationship as it grows between Al and Zret. It is exactly that. It's that
right,
beautiful journey of two people coming together and learning about each other, and learning about
yeah,
others, and learning about new cultures, and experiencing different cultures. And it's
yes,
such a magnificent, I mean, the one thing that I think you take away in your life is something like this.
right.
And
It's a beautiful exchange, and also the fact that there was that little bit of, oh, I wonder if they like me, or I
right.
wonder if they're gonna get back to me, or you
Yeah.
know, am I worthy of this kind of thing, which we all have with each other, you
Yeah.
know. So even someone from another star race can have that kind of insecurity. It's an amazing thought to have. Like, you just assume that they're so much more advanced than us. How could they think that? But even they wonder, will they like me?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, I always make fun of, Ika is jealous sometimes. I don't know why, but he gets jealous, and he's passive aggressive. Yeah, I mean, there'll be, like, he knows. Yeah, I would call him faults. It's personality. It's not a fault. It's a personality.
Yeah, it's a
It's
trait. It's
vulnerability.
a trait. Yeah.
It's a depth. It's a depth and layer, which is what all beings have.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
that's beautiful, you know?
Right. It
Yeah,
is.
Duret's not perfect, he has bad depth perception, obviously. He has he's a poor judge of landscapes and how to jump. But I mean, it's like everyone's got, yeah, it's
So, oh, well, um, Frank, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
No, I think that was a wonderful synopsis, and I'm glad that Andrea was able to get a copy of the book. The original title was The Shocking Truth, and she said it was re-released as
Starfall.
Starfall. Okay.
Yeah, Starfall. Yeah, yeah. Same book though, which is
Yes.
great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was telling Linda it's very rare, the original copy of that book, because it was sold very privately by Hal, just to get his story out there. And if people look for it today on eBay or on Amazon, they'll find it's very, very costly. It's an honor to be invited back here, Linda, to share this really incredible experience I had with Albert. And he was the first contactee I ever met. And he, as far as I'm concerned, he was the grandfather and godfather of contactees. A lot of what he brought forward in his experience tended to be validated by other contactees from the 50s onward. And it's interesting. His experience started, and I met him. I became a member of Del Valle UFO, and he was brought in as a guest speaker because he was released from his bonds of secrecy. And this is a story he shared with us. He was on a camping trip with his friend. He was at the age of 16, and this is in 1920. 1920, okay? And they're on a canoe trip, and they're going down the Mattawa River, which is the river that connects the upper United States with Canada. And they were traversing a portion between upper New York State and Canada. And they reached a part in the river where there was a lot of rapids, and they wanted to find a calm place that they could portage their canoe around and get onto more smooth canoeing. So Albert took one bank of the river, and his friend took the other bank of the river. And I believe Albert had taken the far bank of the river. So he was away from the original campsite. So he's walking along the river, and he's looking for a place where they could portage across to get to calmer waters. And he hears a sound saying, "Help, help, somebody please help me, help me." And he didn't know where it was coming from. So he thought maybe it was from the forest behind him. So he started walking back into the forest, and the voice became much fainter. So he started walking back again towards the water, and he said the voice became louder, but he still couldn't see anyone. So he said he walked closer to the edge of the river, and there were these tremendous crevasses. And he said he looked down in one of the crevasses, and he said he saw this young fella who was wearing what Albert said was a one-piece outfit. He wasn't wearing clothes as Albert was wearing, or was customary during that time period. And he said that his leg was wedged against the side of the crevice. And Albert jumped down there, and he said, how did you happen to fall in here? And he said, I was fishing. And he said, I stepped backward. And he said, I didn't realize that I had loose footing, and I fell into this crevice. And Albert noticed that he had a belt that had lights on it, but the lights were broken. I think he said 6 lights on the belt, and they were broken. So he said, I can't move. And Albert said, let me try to help wedge you out of here. So Albert tried to help to wedge him out, and he couldn't. And he said, stay here. Albert had an axe and a length of rope, and he cut down a sapling, and he made like a hoist. And he wrapped the rope around this young fellow's waist. And the young fellow looked to be in his early 20s, okay? He had long hair and looked to be in his early 20s. So Albert was able to get him up off of the wedging against the side of the crevice. And he saw that this fellow's leg was broken. And he said, I'm going to have to fix a splint for you. He said, you can't walk on that leg the way that it is. So the fellow agreed that Albert should do a splint for him. And he made a splint. And the fellow said to Albert, thank you so very much. But he said, just help me to my feet. He said, I'll be all right from here. And Albert said, well, how did you get here? I don't see a boat around here. And this fellow said, my father was an inventor, and he invented an airplane. And he said, I flew the little airplane here. And this is 1920. And Albert's looking around thinking, an airplane, this was the era of biplanes, and they needed a long runway to take off into land. And the fellow said, he said, my plane, my father's invention, doesn't need a long runway. So he said, it's back in the wood line. And he said, just help me in my feet. And he said, I'll be all right now. I should be able to make it back. So Albert said, I'll help you to your feet, but there's no way you're going to be able to make it back. So he helped the fellow to his feet, and he took a couple steps and he fell down again. And this happened 3 times. And Albert said to this fellow, he said, you're never going to be able to go back there unless you let me help you. And the fellow said, all right. He said, you may help me. But he said, I want you to promise me something. And Albert said, sure. He said, I don't want you to say anything about what you see regarding this little plane, because it's my father's invention. And Albert said, all right. He said, I will not say anything about it. So they walked back into the wood line, and it's heavily wooded. And he walked back maybe 100 yards, and they come to the base of a little hill. And the fellow says to Albert, he said, at the bottom of that hill, there's a clearing, and my little plane's in a clearing. And he said, remember what you promised me. You're not going to say anything about this plane. And Albert said, I promised you, and I will say nothing about it. So they get to the top of the hill, and they see a clearing that's maybe 60 feet in diameter. And in the middle of the clearing is what looks to be, and this is what Albert said, he said, looked like 2 saucers, like a cup and saucer. One of the saucer bottoms was on top, and one was on the bottom. He said it was like a cup and saucer, but 2 of the saucers seemed like they had been put together and formed this craft that he said was a little airplane. And he said it was like the color of aluminum, and he said it was on a tripod. And he said it was smooth. It had no marks on it at all. And the fellow looked at Albert and he said, remember your promise. And he said, help me to the edge of my little plane. And Albert helped him down to it. And he reached underneath the edge of the plane, and it was circular. Of course, it was circular. And when he did that, he said he heard something open in the center part of the ship. And an entry opened, but there was no stairs there. He'd have to pull himself up into the craft. So the fellow couldn't do it. And he said to Albert, he said, would you help boost me into my craft? And Albert said, sure. So Albert boosted him up, and he said, when he looked inside, he said, nothing was as he thought he would see in a plane. He said he saw all these lights. He said he saw monitors. He said he saw a chair, and he said he saw a control panel. And when he boosted him up, the fellow said to him, he said, thank you again for your help and for assisting me in getting to my plane. And he said, remember your promise to me. And he said, I'm going to start my plane now. And he said, I want you to get to the edge of the clearing. He said, because there's some vibration with my plane. And he said, I don't want you to be affected by it. And Albert said, all right. And they shook hands, and he said, thank you again. So Albert went to the edge of the clearing, and he saw the portal latch close, and he heard this low hum, and then it started to increase in vibration and frequency, and then it was beyond the range of human hearing. But he said it lifted up off the ground, and the tripod retracted inside of the bottom of this little plane, this little craft. So he said all of a sudden it was there, and he said the next thing he knew, it was gone. He said it was like it never was there at all. So, but his friend, his fellow that he had rescued, Albert told him, he said, my friend and I were looking for a place to portage. And he said, we're on this canoe trip. And this fellow said to him, he said, well, on the left bank of the river, the opposite bank of where Albert was, there's going to be a smooth area where there's no rapids. And he said, you'll be able to portage across and continue on your rafting trip or your canoe trip. So Albert was thinking about all this, and he went back and he met up with his friend, and his friend said, Albert, guess what? I found a great place where we could portage across. And he said, we'll be able to take our canoe here. And he said, we won't be into any rapids. And he said, Albert thought to himself, this is a validation. What that fellow told me was indeed correct. So they continued on their canoe trip, and they stopped for the evening, and they made a little camp and set up their tent by the river and set up a campfire. And after they had gotten done eating, Albert's friend said, I'm going to write a letter that we could drop off the next town we come close to, letting our parents know how we're doing. And he said, do you want to turn in yet? And Albert said, no. He said, I want to stay out here by the campfire a little bit. And he was facing the river, and there was no moon that night. He said the starry sky was just beautiful. It was just gorgeous. So he was thinking about the events of the day, And he was wondering, did I really experience this? Did I really find someone who had fallen into a crevice? And I was able to extract him and take him to this little plane. And this little plane was not like anything I'd ever seen before. And as he's thinking about it, he's looking out over the river. And the next thing he notices, the craft is there. And he said it's just maybe 50 or 60 feet above the water. And he said, as he's thinking about it, he said the craft starts doing this. It starts tilting back and forth like it's waving. And Albert waves back, and he said the craft did that several more times. And then he said it shot off without any sound, and it looked like a star in the sky. So Albert realized that what he had experienced was not his imagination. It was a true event. So he went back home, and a couple of weeks passed, and he got a postcard. And the postcard said, if you'd like to renew the acquaintance that we had established at the Mattawa River, he said, meet me at the Hastings Hotel, which is in Hastings, New York. And it had a date and it had a time. And he says we could continue our friendship. So Albert was so excited. And again, he's at the age of 16. And he says to his mom that he wants to go to the Hastings Hotel and meet someone. And it was going to be on a Saturday. So he got up early that morning and he got dressed, and he wore a suit because he wanted to impress this fella. And he's in the lobby of the Hastings Hotel, and he's wondering, how will I ever recognize this guy? Will I recognize him? And just as he's thinking that, the fellow walks up, and he's wearing earth clothes, and his hair is cut. So he doesn't have long hair. So he walks over to Albert, and he shakes his hand, and he said, oh, it's so good to see you. And, oh, I forgot to tell you, at the bottom of the postcard, when he said, meet me at the Hastings Hotel, it was signed to your friend Zret, Z-R-E-T. Okay. It was spelled Z-R-E-T, Zret. So he shook hands with Albert, and Albert said, oh, it's so nice to see you again. And he had mentioned to, Albert had mentioned to him, he said, when you were at that fishing trip, he said, I never saw any fishing rod. He said, all I saw was a little wand. And his friend said, well, that wand was a collapsed fishing rod. And he said, it's another thing my father had invented. There's a button on it, and you push it, and the fishing rod comes out. So he said, Zret says to him, he said, I have a car outside. And he said, would you like to go fishing with me? He said, I have regular fishing poles with me. And he said, we could talk. So they're driving out to this secluded lake. And all the while, Zret is asking Albert about his family, how's things at school, how's his family doing, not talking anything about himself. So they pulled to the secluded area, and they both have a fishing pole. And Zred is still asking him common things about, the area and his neighborhood and Albert's friends. And there happens to be a log floating along the pond. And there's these little turtles. And the turtles are running to the edge of the log and falling into the water. And Zred says to Albert, he said, Albert, those turtles are a lot like mankind. They keep doing the same thing over and over again. And Albert said, what do you mean the turtles are like mankind? And he said, where did you get that little craft? And he said, where'd you get that little airplane at? And how does that airplane work? And he said, where are you from? And Zred said to him, he said, I know you have a lot of questions. And he said, I'm here to answer them for you. He said, you had saved my life. And he said, there's nothing more that you could do than save a person's life. And he said, I've been given approval to tell you who I am and where I'm from, but it's to be shared just between you and I. It's not to be released. So he told him that his race came from Tau Ceti, the constellation Tau Ceti, and from a planet called Norca. And the planet was starting to go through a period where they were losing their climate. They were losing the ability to be able to support life as they knew it. It was becoming very, very dry. It was going through a climate change. So they did some exploration of other parts of our galaxy, and they found this planet that was capable of supporting life, which is our planet Earth. So they decided to build these huge spacecraft to put their population in and bring animals and plants and bring them to Earth. So he said the journey took 58 years to get here, okay? They were traveling not at the speed of light, less than the speed of light, And he said when they came into our solar system, they had not anticipated the gravity of the sun, and some of their craft crashed. Some crashed into Jupiter, some crashed into the sun. One crashed and was partially damaged. It landed on Venus, but the one that landed on Mars was all right. So what they did was they set up a base of operations on Mars and then also on Venus. And he said they came and they started to reconnoiter Earth, and they said they saw a very primitive form of mankind there. And they said that they decided to help elevate their awareness and consciousness by teaching them how to use fire, how to use agriculture, how to plant things. And he said during that time period, he said there were two continents that don't exist anymore. And he said there were continents that you referred to as Atlantis and Lemuria. And he said that they continued to share with the people of Atlantis and the people of Lemuria. And he said the people of Atlantis became very scientifically oriented. He said they exceeded the Lemurians. The Lemurians were more spiritually oriented. And he said they continued to work with them. And he said they shared with them everything except one scientific aspect. And that one aspect was the molecular breakdown of matter, which is similar to like an atom bomb or a hydrogen bomb. And he said they did not want to reveal that to the Atlanteans or the Lemurians because they felt that it would be like giving matches to children.
Yes.
So Albert said that Zret told him that the Atlanteans used their influence with the visitors and finally was able to get information about the breakdown of the atomic structure of matter, the molecular structure of matter. And they used that as a threat against the Lemurians. They wanted to have control over the Lemurians. And they said, if you don't allow us to have superior rule over you, we're going to destroy you. So the Lemurians resisted it, and the Atlanteans set off this device, but to their chagrin, it wound up destroying and sinking both Atlantis and Lemuria. Well, when that occurred, Zret's culture, they said they were not going to interact directly with mankind again. They will monitor them from a distance, but they will not directly interact with them again. So they said they continued to monitor us, and they watched how we continued to grow again in Egypt and in Samaria and in Central and South America and Africa, different parts of the world. And he said in the late 1800s, they saw that we had discovered the use of radium and the use of X-rays. And they said that we were on track of being able to harness the power of the atom again. And they said at that point, they realized that we may get ourselves into some trouble. So they asked for volunteers. They asked for 100 volunteers to come down for a period of 100 years. Okay. And he said the people that were to come here were to be men, not women, because they thought that women would be in danger here because there's a lot of bad attitude towards women.
Yes.
So the 100 that came here, and they were distributed all around the planet in different countries. And he said they were able to intermingle with Earthlings, but they could not tell them who they were, and they could not stay at a job more than 4 or 5 years because they did not age. Now, Zret was be about 1,700 years of age, but he looked to be in his early 20s, okay? They had overcome disease, they had overcome aging, and so the 100 people that came here, Zret was one of the 100, okay? So he got an opportunity because he was saved, his life was saved by Albert. He got a chance to meet the other representatives that were here. And he said some of the representatives that were here were in electronics, some of them were in medicine, some of them were in drafting. He said all different disciplines. And he said they would change jobs after 4 or 5 years because no one would see them. Folks would see that they don't age. Right. So Albert said that they befriended him, and he would meet with him on a regular basis. Now, Albert got older, and he got involved in photography, and he became a cameraman, and he worked for Howard Hughes, the aerospace engineer and builder, and also film director.
Yes.
Albert worked with Howard Hughes when he made the movie Hell's Angels. And Albert came up with a new type of lens system that could be mounted on the planes, the airplanes, the biplanes at that time. that
Wow.
could photograph the dogfights and be very realistic. So they didn't have to use models. So Albert got a patent for that, and he became quite well, he was became comfortable and living because of the lens system that he had created and got a patent for. And later on, he got married, and he shared some information with his wife, but not much. He would say that he had friends from other countries that he would interact with, and he would actually go off planet, okay? And he would be shown different parts of our solar system. And Albert said that he lived in Philly at the time, and he was retired, of course. And he said that he was allowed to be given a free right to share this information. And he said before he was able to share this information, he told us that he was driving on a major thoroughfare here in New Jersey called Route 130, and he suffered a stroke, and he lost control of the car. He was driving 60 miles an hour, and he wound up hitting the concrete barrier and wound up hitting the curbing, and he was really, really in bad shape. And the policeman who came and took him out of the car thought he was intoxicated, but he wasn't. He had suffered a stroke. So they took him to the local hospital that happened to be in New Jersey, in Wellingborough, New Jersey. And he said that the doctors had told his family that he was on a death watch. They didn't expect him to live through the night. So the family stayed there overnight, and he was in a private room, and the room had the lights dim. And the next morning, when the sun came up, Albert sat up in bed and said, "I'm ready to go home." Well, the family couldn't believe what happened. And Albert said, Zret came in at nighttime, and he said he had an invisibility belt that could bend light beams around him so he would be invisible. And he worked on Albert all night long to help him recover from the stroke. And he was able to put him back into perfect order again, with the exception of his left knee that had hit the dashboard during the accident. So Albert walked with a limp. And Zret had told him, he said, "Albert, he said, the only way we could completely repair your knee would be if we took you to Venus and you stayed there for a while. But he said, if you stayed there for the amount of time that it was necessary to repair your knee, your frequency would change and you could not come back to Earth anymore." And he said, giving you that opportunity, if you want to come to Venus and be perfectly repaired, and he said, you could live there with us. And Albert said, "Well, what about my wife?" Because he loved his wife very, very much. And he said, "Albert, this is being extended to you because you had saved my life. I'm honored to save your life and help put it back into full order again." But he said, this invitation does not extend to your wife. So Albert said, if my wife cannot go with me to Venus, he said, I want to stay here with her. He loved her that much. And they had a wonderful, wonderful relationship. After he finished this discussion, I got a chance to meet with him and talk with him. And we exchanged phone numbers, and I would go over and visit with him, and his wife would have lunch for me. And I would ask his wife, she was such a delightful lady. I'd say, have you ever met Albert's friends? And she said, no, I've never really met them. She said, but he's got a lot of young fellows who come over here and they go out on the porch and they sit and talk. And he said, they dress very, very nicely. He said, they wear very nice, fashionable clothes. And we went into the kitchen, and Albert bent over and told me, he said, Frank, he said, she's met the space visitors. She said, she just doesn't know because they look just like us, but they're young fellas. And she said, Albert's got so many young fellows who come by here. And she says, I don't know why he's attracted to so many young fellows. And Albert had said to me, he said, when he was taken on board the craft, he said, there's no sensation of movement. He said, you feel like you're in your living room. And he said, you take off. And he said, you could see out the bottom of the craft where you're going, where you're leaving and where you're going to. And he said that he was brought on to some of the meetings with the 100 members that were here from other planets. Now, this is a great photograph. This is a photograph inside of one of Zret's craft, and it shows all these monitors. These are screens that show activity that's occurring on different parts of the planet Earth and different parts of our solar system. And Albert said there's like hundreds and hundreds of these monitors, and each one are geared to specific areas where they can watch what's going on and be aware of it. And he said that the plan was to help guide us away from destruction, as we had done before during Atlantis and Lemuria, and to form more of a kinship with each other. And he said, this is many, many tests that Earth is going through to learn to respect and to be friendly with one another and live in peace amongst one another. He said, as we do amongst the stars. And he said that they're hoping that mankind will be able to make this graduation into this fuller acceptance of who we are, and that we're all one, that there's no difference among us. Even though there's different colors and different races, it doesn't mean that we're not all one and we're all connected. And Albert said he learned so much from him, and he said he was never judgmental, but he always said that we had so much to learn and we needed to rise above our egos and our selfishness and our petty jealousies of one another. And
Yes.
he said that they had overcome disease and aging, and he said they could live as long as they want to live and then give up their physical body when they so desired. And Albert continued interacting with them, and unfortunately, he didn't get the chance to leave this planet, and he passed from this realm in the 80s. But it was such a joy knowing him, and I would take him to interviews at other radio stations and at newspapers, and when he would go on radio programs and tell the story about his friend and the work that they were doing down here, and that there are other planets that have population. This is a cover of the original book, The Shocking Truth, and it gives a really good example of when Albert saw his Rhett's craft above the river. It's a beautiful image. I love that image. But he said that the ability to be at one with one another would be a challenge that we would have to continue to learn to grow with and to rise above. But some of the people that would call into the radio station when he would be given his story would say he was a crackpot or he had lost his mind, and they would say, "What, are you drunk or on drugs?" I mean, it's really, and I'm telling you, Albert would never get upset. He would just keep a smile on his face, and he said, "Frank, some people are not ready to hear the truth yet," and he said, "Others are." And he said it's an awakening process. But he said, all he's there to do is to share the story, because he said when they released him, they wanted people to be more open and receptive to visitors from other planets that are here to help us. And that coincides with a lot of the early contactees that are generally known, like Adamski and Howard Menger and George Van Tassel and the others. But as far as I know, Albert was the first one to interact with people that look just like us that are interacting down here and have been doing for some period of time.
I wonder where he is now.
Well, I just we're gonna find out. Let's try that.
Go ahead, Andrea. I believe he's on Venus with Threat, and I believe his wife is there too now.
Oh, that's cool.
I really strongly feel he was grabbed. Yeah.
And
That's
I'm telling you, he was a joyful individual, and he always had a smile on his face. I never heard him raise his voice. I never heard him get angry. And I was around him quite a bit, and it was a joy to take him to these places and have him share his story. And the people that had him, like at the newspapers, they were open and receptive to it, and they knew that there was a lot of censorship by the government. And we went to this one newspaper in Pennsylvania, and the guy who had invited us there told us that there was a teletype, and when a story came across that was related to UFOs or to unusual phenomena, he said when they would begin to type the story in on the teletype would lock up, and he said they would get a transmission saying you were not permitted to go on with the story.
Wow.
Isn't that something? That was told to me by a fellow at a radio station and also a fellow at a newspaper.
Well,
Go ahead, Andrea.
People interested, there's a new book that was just released on Major Keyhole.
Yes.
So this happened to him.
Yes.
He had a group of people that he belonged to working for the government. You can even Google Major Keyhole's name on YouTube, and you can see him speaking. He
Yes,
did videos about that and the experiences that he's had where they would cut his mic.
that's right. He was on CBS, and this is on YouTube. He was being interviewed on CBS, and he started talking about the visitors coming here, and the government knows about it, and they cut his mic off. They interrupted the program. They stopped it. They went to a commercial break.
Yeah,
Wow.
So the ability of doing that.
Actually, it's you can actually hear the one there's a famous one where they did the mic cut at the Circle Theater.
Yes, yes, yeah.
So that's the one that's actually on YouTube. People can look that up.
Yes,
Yeah.
they certainly can. They certainly can.
Something as we oh yeah.
There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. I just recently saw one where it was an astronaut, and I can't remember which one. I'm sorry, but he was talking and on an interview in a morning show, and he started talking about the Sumerians, the ancient Sumerians, and what they knew,
Yes,
and they immediately were like, "Oh, that's so fascinating. We have to go now. Bye."
yes,
They
yes,
like cut
yes.
him off because they didn't want to go any further. So, yep, that's what
I
they
think
do.
it's the same, Linda. I think it's the same astronaut who talked about that they found obelisks on one of the moons of Jupiter.
Oh,
Okay, that's makes sense. Yes, I
Yeah,
think that was the same. It's
yeah.
so, I mean, you'd think that by now you could at least say something, but but it's getting out there. I was
it
just
is.
talking to Zoe about this earlier, and we were going down rabbit holes this morning. We were finding all kinds of things on TikTok, and we found a lot of videos where people are talking about they're finding things out and they're sharing it with people. And there was a video of they saw a reptilian on a plane, and they show it. They show what the person looked like. Everybody in the plane finally saw it. Everybody, all the people that were on the plane were like, "Oh my God." So the veil is lifting. People are seeing things now. They're not. It's not
Even
hidden
with the
anymore.
Sasquatch, more and more of them
Yeah.
are allowing themselves to be photographed and to be captured on cell phones, cell phone cameras. And as Andrea had pointed out, even some of the commercials are showing saucers in the commercials.
Yes.
I just
There's
saw it
at
again.
least three of them that you shared with me, Andrea.
Oreo,
Um,
Cheez-It, and
Yeah,
Squarespace.
that's
Yeah, and
right.
they
Yeah,
were all on a lot of them were the Super Bowl ones, right? The recent ones when they
David
showed
aired it. The Cheez-It one
yeah,
I did again. I'm like, oh, there.
yes. Oh, they will. After the Super Bowl, they continue to show it. So it's becoming more mainstream now. They can't deny it. People are looking up. People are finally starting to look up in the sky and not so
and
much at their
it's
phones.
part of a conditioning to get us used to the concept because there's going to be more revelations. Our friends
Yeah.
upstairs are continuing to push that it's time for everything to be revealed and released, and they're on the fast track. They really are.
Yes. It's happening. I mean, like they're seeing it. They were trying to take down TikTok. They were trying to get rid of it. But then that's one of the reasons because there's so much disclosure going on that particular platform.
Well,
You
they're
will
not
see
going
a
to
lot
stop
of
this
it.
closure. It's going to continue
They're
to
not.
accelerate. It really is. And so many contactees have told me that the visitors are here and they continue to grow in mass. There's going to be an assimilation program so that people will see that the visitors are here amongst us, and they've meant us no harm.
No, they're right here. I see them all the time. And they're very friendly and very pleasant. I mean, just and beautiful. Like so why would you not want that? You
Yes,
know?
of course. Yeah. And all you have to be is open and receptive to it, and they pick
Mhm.
up your awareness and consciousness, and they pick up your frequency. And if they feel
Yes.
that you're open and receptive, they will come forward and make a gesture to you so that you know that they're here. And
Yes,
they'll
they
do it
do.
very innocently, very innocently.
Yes,
Right.
they do. They smile and one girl gave me the peace sign.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And another guy was just very friendly and he was working in a store as a clerk. And he was
Yeah.
sweeping up well, actually, I broke a glass, unfortunately, and I apologized to him. And he was like, no, no, there's no need to apologize. And then he was sweeping it up and he was like, did I get everything? Did I get all the pieces? I don't want anybody to step on that. That would be horrible. And I was just like, he cares. So he cares way more than
True.
a normal human would care.
Yes.
And he was so sweet and so friendly. And I was like, yeah, and then I just kind of sent him a telepathic message, like, I see you. And then he
Yes.
smiled at me.
Andrea, do you
yeah.
remember towards the end of the book, he talks about a meeting with the 100, and he said all the hugging and the joy of being together in a brotherhood and weeping openly, but in a joyful weeping, that he's meeting all these people that look like us, that are here as visitors to help us raise and be more part of the cosmic family, you know?
This is on page, my book's on page 17. This is when Zret asked me, he said, did you mention me to my parents? But my answer was no and never would. So he was a very deep this was he himself, Zret, was a very deep cherished secret for Al. And this knowledge I had would be guarded and as though it were the map to a buried treasure. So he laughed, Zret laughed, and he says, you really are a romanticist, aren't you? Your blonde hair, blue eyes, the feeling of compassion, and the great sense of beauty that you find in nature almost identical to my own features and character. They mark you as a true throwback to my ancient ancestors who discovered these lands so long ago. You probably already have an inkling that I am a stranger to your modern world. This decision of explanation is the personal responsibility. Our mission here will forever be cloaked in the tightest secrecy. And then they go on to, start sharing experiences together. But yeah, it's just that, amazing. When he first meets him again at the table, and he says, "Oh my God," he says, I did have a few butterflies. This is that first meeting at the hotel.
Yes.
If I would remember his face, and I entered the lobby as he came toward me with outstretched hand and the greeting of, "You surely look a lot different than when we first met," which echoed my thought, doubting very much if I would have recognized him in the conventional suit, white shirt and tie. I first asked the pronunciation of his name and inquired about his injuries. With a mischievous chuckle, he replied, "Just call me Zret for now. In the future, you will figure it out. Thanks for your timely intervention with first aid. The legs and I are in good shape." And then they just, sat together, had lunch, and continued on with but it's such a beautiful, beautiful book.
It's a beautiful story. It really is. It's so uplifting.
It's interesting to realize that was 104 years ago, right?
That's
and so for a man to have long hair in 1920 would have been very unusual.
Yes.
So yes, amazing.
Yeah.
It's like Howard Menger. He talked about the visitors coming and visiting him in Highbridge, New Jersey, and he said they were coming with long hair, and he would cut their hair, and he would get them earth clothes, and they would ask him to drive them to Boston or to New York or Philadelphia or Washington, D.C. There would be things that they'd have to do there, and then Howard would pick them up and drive them back to his property in Highbridge, and they'd get on board their craft and go back.
So what happened with Albert, was this in Pennsylvania?
Howard Menger. He's the one.
No, I know. Yes. But this one with Albert, was it in Pennsylvania?
Albert's experience occurred in upstate New York, but he moved to Pennsylvania. He moved to Pennsylvania. He lived in California for a while too, because he worked with Howard Hughes with making films.
Right.
And he came to Pennsylvania. He loved Philadelphia. He loved Pennsylvania. And he said the people here are really, really friendly. And he lived in a great neighborhood too. He lived in a great neighborhood in the Northeast Philly. And
that's where I used to live.
You did? Yes.
Yes, I know that area. It's beautiful. It's
off Common Avenue. He lived off Common Avenue.
Oh, Cotman. I lived right near Cotman. Oh my goodness, that's so weird. There's a little park there called Pennypack Park.
That's right.
And there's another park called Pennypack Ecological Trust. I lived right near that. And it's a preserve. It's a preserve.
Yes.
They won't touch it. And I used to go there all the time, and I would see the woodpeckers, and it's gorgeous. It's just so beautiful. Yes, I could see why he would be drawn to that area. Yes.
Funny how all of us have these different connections to these different things.
Yes. The synchronicities.
Yeah.
When I was reading the Howard Menger book, I knew exactly where he was talking about, all these places that I knew where he was talking. I was like, that I've been there.
Yes.
So it's so interesting.
And Linda, Philadelphia, Fairmount Park is the largest city park in the world. It's the largest city park in the world.
I did not know that, but it's huge. Yeah.
It is huge. And it's right in the middle of the city. So all parts of Philadelphia are connected through Fairmount Park. And they're going to add another 1,000 acres to it. They're going to add 1,000 acres more.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear, because that's the one thing I love about Philadelphia is the natural beauty, and that they value that, and that they don't try to develop and overdevelop. And so that, and just to have that, it just makes it such a beautiful vibration. It's such a higher vibe to have that, in your
Linda,
area.
do you remember the Wissahickon Park?
Oh, yes.
Remember that with the
Wissahickon
Indian
Park.
where he's got his hand up to his head and he's looking out into the distance? Wissahickon is
Yes.
the name of an Indian tribe. That's the name of an
Yes.
Indian. Yeah.
Yes. And so
Interesting. Really.
I love that. I love that all that still exists and that it's still there. So, shout out to Philly. Shout out to all my Philly peeps out there. I
Yeah.
love you. I miss you. I haven't seen you in a long time, but yes.
Well, it's
Beautiful.
good that your audience will have access to Howard's book via the PDF, and they'll be
Yes.
able to see in more detail and see some of the illustrations that he had in there of his experiences with his star friends. And believe me, they were his family, Tim. They really were.
Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us, Frank. As usual, you always pull
My
it
honor.
out
Oh,
and
we can't
show
wait.
us all
Okay,
this,
it's been a while. It's been a dry
all
spell.
these amazing stories. Yes. And yeah, we missed you.
Well, did I ever share the story about Callie with you? She was a really incredible mystic, and she did her work very, very quietly. Did I share that with you and your audience?
You did briefly. Yes. Yes, you did.
Okay. All right. Because I don't
Yeah.
know how much detail I went into about her, but she was really an incredible woman. And she studied at the Monastery of the Seven Rays above Lake Titicaca in Peru. And she was
Wow.
one of only two women that were ever allowed to come into it. The other one was Sister Thedra, who lived in Mount Shasta. And they knew of each other. They both went through it in the 50s. And
Wow.
yeah, unbelievable stories. I mean, and but she was very, very quiet. And she raised four children. And her husband didn't want to have anything to do with her talents and abilities. He was a union negotiator and he would travel all over the world. And when Callie would go with him, she would have these incredible in earth, interdimensional experiences. And maybe sometime we'll go into more about her.
Yes, next time we'll do that one, the next
Be good.
episode with
That'll be
you.
good.
So I look forward to that.
Yeah, it'll be good. All right.
Yes.
Onward and upward. And if folks have any questions, they could always email me. I think you've given them my email address, or it's
Yes,
going to.
I can put it in the description.
Yes,
Again,
the Gmail
yes.
account, the email.
Yes,
Okay. And
absolutely.
Andrea, thank you for that wonderful synopsis that you opened the program with. That was very, very good.
Well, thank you very much. It's always an honor to be able to, share that kind of information with everyone.
It is. It is. Thank you again. And onward and upward.
Exactly.
Yes, appreciate having both of you on, and thanks again. Everyone, check out the book that we're going to be putting in the description, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Oh, yes.
Yay.
Have a
Ciao for
great
now,
week.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.